My wife told me she was pregnant, but I can't be the father. I'm infertile. I'm 38, my wife is 33, and we've been married for 2 years. We dated for 3 years before that. She wanted to get married more than I did, and to make her happy, I agreed. A year ago, we started trying for a baby, which was again at her insistence. We tried hard, but we couldn't conceive. The situation affected my mental health so much that I decided to get tested. While we were trying for a child, my wife became quite harsh. I tried to cope with her behavior, but it became unbearable for me. A few days after the examination, the doctors told me I was infertile. Honestly, it broke my heart. Although the idea of having a child wasn't mine initially, I had started to imagine myself as a father and genuinely wanted to be one. Learning that I could never be a dad was, at that point, the most devastating news of my life. But worse was yet to come. I tried to muster the courage to tell my wife that I was the reason we couldn't conceive, but I was scared of her reaction. She was already treating me harshly, and I couldn't imagine how she'd respond when she found out that what she wanted most was unlikely to happen with me. So I waited for a few days after receiving the test results to tell her. However, she surprised me first. For days after I found out I was infertile, she sat me down to share some important news. I was terrified, thinking she somehow knew about my infertility. But no, she wanted to tell me that she was pregnant. I was completely shocked by what she said. Luckily, she didn't notice my true feelings and immediately began celebrating. I tried to share her joy to avoid suspicion. The next day, though, I went for another test to confirm my infertility. Once again, the results were the same. I was devastated. If I wasn't the father, then my wife was definitely cheating on me. The medical procedures required for artificial conception were expensive, and since I was the only one working, she couldn't have undergone them without asking me for money. This meant she had to be unfaithful. The thought was so disturbing and awful that I didn't act for several days. Meanwhile, my wife was busy planning a big party to announce her pregnancy. She seemed genuinely happy, while I was utterly crushed. I couldn't let my feelings show because I needed to uncover the truth. I didn't even tell my family about what was happening. It was too personal to share. I couldn't confront my wife directly either. Too much time had passed, and I wanted to find out who the father of her child was. If I confronted her outright, she might leave, and I'd never learn the truth. Fortunately, I found out everything on the day of the party. There were many people at the celebration, including our families, friends, and some of my colleagues. My wife also invited one of our neighbors, who lived across the street. He's 27, young, and undeniably better looking than I am. In fact, he probably looks better than most people. He's a model, or, more accurately, someone trying to make a name for himself in the modeling industry. He moved into his aunt's house to be closer to the city, since his family lives far away. My wife always had a soft spot for this guy. She cooked for him and his aunt when he first moved in, and he even came over for dinner a few times. We talked about his work. He seemed polite and well-read. Like my wife, he's also into literature, so they had a lot in common and hit it off immediately when they met. I never had a problem with him because he seemed nice enough, and I trusted my wife. But on the day of the party, when he walked in and my wife's eyes lit up, I felt something shift. She went straight to him as soon as he entered, and they hugged longer than she hugged anyone else. It seemed like no one but me noticed, but I saw that there was something between them. I had to find a way to confirm my suspicions. I pretended to go to the bathroom, but went to our bedroom instead. I opened my wife's laptop a few days after she had told me about her pregnancy. I had already checked her phone while she was asleep, but found nothing suspicious. Gaining access to her laptop was more challenging because she was constantly using it at home, watching something or typing. Whenever I asked what she was doing, she would turn the screen away and say she was working on her novel. This had been going on for months, and I respected her privacy because I genuinely believed she was writing a book. Now, however, the situation had changed, and I was almost certain there was no novel. It was just an excuse to hide what was on her laptop. Fortunately, the laptop wasn't password protected, so I easily gained access. After some searching, I found another email address besides her primary one. I switched to it and checked the sent and received messages. These emails were full of love confessions between my wife and our neighbor. I knew it was him because he used his real name in some of the more recent emails. In those, she told him about the pregnancy. He didn't take it well and seemed upset, so the emails stopped for a while, likely because he wanted to end things. However, my wife wasn't about to let him go. Eventually, I came across the most shocking email of all. In it, she told him she had spoken to a friend who was a lawyer and who would help her file for divorce right after the baby was born. The reason she had been so insistent on having a child with me was to secure child support and alimony after the divorce. That way, she could leave with our neighbor in a few months and live happily ever after. I was horrified when I read that email, and even now, I feel sick every time I think about it. Still, I quickly pulled myself together, took pictures of the emails with my phone, and put the laptop back in its place. I was less shocked by the infidelity than by this elaborate, devious plan. Cheating is one thing, but tricking me into fathering a child, only to force me to pay huge sums to fund her dream life with her loser boyfriend, was on another level. And the cherry on top? She was such a great actress that I hadn't suspected a thing. I was furious and decided to play along with her charade, only to strike back when she least expected it. Call me crazy, but I did what I had to do. For the next 9 months, I played the role of the perfect husband and father-to-be. It was tough, knowing she was lying to me the entire time, but the more she pretended to be happy with me, the more determined I became to see my plan through. I attended every doctor's appointment, made sure she took her vitamins on time, and became the best husband anyone could dream of. Finally, a few days ago, my wife went into labor. I was incredibly nervous about the whole situation, but I set that aside and drove her to the hospital myself. I called her parents in advance but not mine, as I didn't want them there in case things got too dramatic. Since her parents had to travel for about an hour to get to the hospital, we had some time alone. That's when I decided to drop the bombshell. When she was safely in the delivery room, I told her I was stepping out to call our neighbor so he could come and support her. She looked shocked and started mumbling that it wasn't necessary, and she didn't want anyone else in the room while giving birth. That's when I smiled, pulled out my infertility test results, and showed her the divorce papers I had filed just days before her due date. I had brought them with me on purpose. She stared at the documents, still looking confused. Then I explained that even if I had wanted to, I couldn't have gotten her pregnant, so the child wasn't mine. I also told her about the emails I found in her secret account. At that point, she finally understood what was happening. The look on her face was priceless as I walked out of the room while she struggled to find words. I thought I might need to check myself into the hospital because my heart was racing like crazy. I called our neighbor to inform him that my wife was giving birth. I didn't wait for his response and hung up as quickly as possible. Then I sat in my car, waiting for her family to arrive. As soon as I saw her father's car pull up to the hospital, I drove off as fast as I could. I even turned off my phone for good measure and headed to a motel outside the city. I had already packed all my belongings a few weeks earlier and stored them in the car trunk so I wouldn't be caught off guard. The rest of the day, I spent watching TV, drinking beer, and doing everything I could to distract myself. That night, I slept peacefully, knowing I was finally done with the charade. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. Unsurprisingly, there were hundreds of messages from my wife and our neighbor, none of which I even bothered to open. However, I did notice several messages from my parents and brother. I figured my wife must have contacted them when she couldn't reach me. I decided to call my parents to talk. I told them I would come over soon and asked if they could invite my brother so I could explain everything to all of them at once. They deserved to know the truth. When I arrived at my parents' house, my brother was already there. They all looked a bit confused and slightly annoyed, which was natural since they believed I had just skipped the birth of my own child and caused them to miss the birth of their grandchild. I sat them down and told them everything, the whole story, along with my reasons for what I did. By the time I finished, they were stunned and speechless. I had been ready for an onslaught of questions and accusations, but none of that happened. All my father said was that he hoped nothing worse would come of this. If anyone else had comments, they kept them to themselves. So overall, it went peacefully. That was a few days ago. While my family hasn't said much, my wife has gone all out trying to paint me as the villain who ruined her experience of becoming a mother for the first time. She's still trying to call and message me since I left, but I haven't responded. Even our neighbor messaged me a few hours ago, saying my wife was really upset and that we should put our differences aside for her sake and try to work things out. I can't believe the audacity of these people. They still try to talk to me as if this is some minor issue. The neighbor even mentioned that my wife had started to fall back in love with me during her pregnancy, which had shocked them both, and said I should at least try to give our marriage a second chance. That, of course, is complete nonsense. If she really had started falling back in love with me, why was the neighbor still in her life? I can't fathom why they think I'm that naive. My wife is upset, but there's nothing I can do about that. What bothers her more is the fact that I knew everything from the start but stayed with her through the pregnancy, playing along with her lies. She accuses me of being dishonest for staying with her and misleading her, even though I knew the child wasn't mine, and that she had cheated on me with the neighbor. Update: it's been about a week since the baby was born, and I'm still living in a hotel. I haven't visited my wife and don't plan to. She keeps texting and calling, but I don't see the point. I've made it abundantly clear that I don't want to talk to her or listen to anything she has to say. I haven't blocked her yet, but the neighbor is already on my block list. He had the nerve to message me, reminding me that my wife still hopes and wants me to return to her. I'm 100% sure that the only reason our neighbor is still with her and trying to convince me to forgive her is because he's hoping she can still get something, alimony or child support, from the divorce proceedings. Both of them are essentially unemployed. My wife was a housewife, which I respected and appreciated, but not only was she managing the house, she was also cheating on me behind my back, an unforgivable act. Before anyone criticizes me, let me clarify. I didn't ask her to quit her job after we got married. While we were dating, I supported her professional aspirations and she worked. However, she later said she wanted to leave her job to focus on managing our home. I didn't object. It was her choice, and I earned enough to support us. Now, I'm fairly confident my lawyer will be able to exempt me from paying alimony once we prove her infidelity, which I don't think will be difficult. As for the neighbor, he's still struggling to land a well-paying job in the modeling industry. Covering his own expenses, plus those of my wife and the child, will likely be impossible for them, even if they pool their resources. So good luck to them. I'm just thankful I've escaped this mess and won't have to pay for their lifestyle. I hope the divorce process won't be dragged out, but knowing her lack of common sense, she might try to fight it. I'm prepared for that. The photos of the emails from her secret account are safely stored on my phone and backed up on my laptop. Even if she deletes the account, she can't erase the evidence I've secured. In the worst case, I'm even willing to pay alimony, but at least I won't be with her. She should consider herself lucky that I've given her time to leave our home voluntarily rather than evicting her by force. The house is in my name. For now, I'm hoping for the best and that things will settle down soon. Second update, I was right. My wife is an idiot. She decided to bargain because she wasn't happy with the agreement I proposed, which essentially only covered the money she had spent during our marriage. Even that seemed overly generous to me. I don't understand what miracle she's hoping for. Well, good luck to her. Yesterday, she texted me saying she had moved out of the house. I happily returned home, thinking she had gone to her parents or somewhere similar. To my disappointment, I found out she had moved into the neighbor's house across the street. Now I have to see her and her boyfriend every day. I briefly considered moving back to the hotel but decided against it. This is my home, and I have every right to live here. I'm not packing up and leaving just because they want to make my life miserable. I wondered why she didn't go to her parents, especially since living with the neighbor could hurt her case in the divorce proceedings. But I didn't have to wonder for long. Scrolling through the unread messages I'd received from various people, I noticed one from her father. I hadn't replied to many people who had written to me over the past few days, and his message had gotten lost in the shuffle. It was a long message in which he expressed regret for what his daughter had done, and said that he and the family strongly condemned her actions. His words meant a lot to me and validated my feelings. I even felt tears well up in my eyes, but held them back. He apologized for her behavior, and said they would no longer support her in any way now that she had announced her intention to contest the divorce. To this day, nothing my wife has done makes any sense to me. Everything she tries ultimately backfires. Even someone like her should be able to see that. Either she's incredibly foolish, or she still has some twisted, devious plans up her sleeve. I'm hoping for the first, but I wouldn't be surprised by the second. She's a terrible person. Living so close to them will definitely lead to complications, and I'm sure they'll try to make my life difficult or provoke me. But I'm determined not to let them get to me or give them any ammunition to use against me. On the bright side, I'm saving a lot of money now that I don't have to live in a hotel. Third update. A month has passed since the divorce negotiations began, and things aren't going well for my wife. I've successfully proven her infidelity, thanks to her making it easy for me by moving in with the very man I accused her of cheating with. This left no room for doubt about the truth of my claims. She tried to make false accusations against me, claiming I became an alcoholic, which caused my infertility and led her to cheat. She also alleged that I became abusive and bitter while we were trying to conceive. However, these lies were easily disproven since everyone knows I quit drinking last year when we decided to try for a baby, and I haven't touched alcohol since. I can't understand why she thought this would work. It was a foolish move. I think she's just grasping at straws, because her original plan has completely fallen apart. Now she's too busy with motherhood to come up with any elaborate schemes. At least for now, she's occupied. The child's father is too much of a fool. This is how they live now. By this point, it became clear to both of us that my wife's chances of receiving any alimony are slim. I suspect she told her boyfriend about this because a few days ago, she and the baby were unceremoniously kicked out of his house. Yes, it's true. I heard yelling and arguing coming from their place, and a few minutes later, I saw him pushing my wife out onto the street while she was holding the baby. He was shouting and cursing her with every insult imaginable. I watched the scene unfold from my living room, and as soon as I saw him push her while she was holding the baby, I ran outside to help. Despite everything, the feud didn't matter. I couldn't allow an innocent baby to suffer for something he wasn't responsible for. When I reached their doorstep, the door had already slammed shut. My wife was standing there, crying, with our son in her arms. I took the baby from her and grabbed her hand to lead them back to my house across the street. Once inside, I called her father to come and take her home. An hour later he arrived, thanked me for everything I'd done, and took them away. During that hour, my wife cried like a child, and I had to console both her and the baby at the same time. I wanted to call the police, but she begged me not to, saying she didn't want to cause more trouble. She repeatedly apologized for everything that had happened and admitted that she had been so blindly in love that she lost all her dignity and moral compass. She genuinely seemed to regret everything. She said she would accept whatever happened and wouldn't contest anything further, so the divorce could be finalized quickly. I hope this is the one positive outcome of the situation. I also hope she finds the courage to press charges against that bastard and work on rebuilding her mental health. At least I know I've done everything I could and conducted myself with integrity. I have no regrets.